Hello and welcome to this, the fifth of the videos about Excel text functions. I'm Philip Burton of excelinoffice.com, and in this video we're going to join text strings together. And if you're thinking, oh, I already know how to do this, I know the ampersand, well, there's a lot more than you can do with just using the ampersand. So I'm just going to hide columns G through J, so we've got more room to use. So, first of all, let's talk about the ampersand. The ampersand does indeed join two strings together. So, let's take an example. We have, in the previous four videos, separated out people's names into first name, middle name, and last name. So now I'm going to bring them all back together in a column called full name. And this is equal to D7 ampersand E7 ampersand F7. Now, if I do that, you'll see that the name is all back together again because we've still retained all the spaces. So this is really Ken space, and we'll be looking at that in a later video, how to get rid of those spaces. But if it hadn't retained all those spaces, then I'll need to insert a space between each one of these. So D7 and a space. Now a space is a character, but it's a string literal. In other words, I don't want it to refer to a formula, I just want it to be a string. And to get a string literal, we need to enclose it with speech marks. So these are the double quotation marks. So D7 and a space, and E7 and a space, and F7. So now if I move that downwards, you can see that we've got, in this case, an extra space that has come in. Now, if we want to get rid of the double spaces, we can always surround this with a substitute. So we've had a look at substitute a few videos ago. So I'm taking this text, and if you haven't seen that video, then please go back to my earlier videos about text functions. It should be on the playlist. And I want to replace a double space. So now we have two spaces in a quotation mark, or in two speech marks, and replace it with a single space. So now we get back to a single space. Now this is useful because I don't necessarily know that there is always a single space at the end of this. It could, in this case there is, but if there wasn't, then this will add a space, and if there's too many spaces, deduct one away. Now you can see there are still too many spaces in this one, so we could put another substitute around that and do exactly the same thing. So here we have getting rid of double spaces for single spaces, but where there was a triple space, there still remains a double space. So that this next substitute gets rid of that as well. But let's go back to our previous example, because this is all about joining strings together. Now, this is one method of doing this. And by the way, we don't just need to join strings together, we can also join numbers. So if I wanted, for instance, 1 dot Ken J Sanchez, then I could say equals A7 ampersand, and then a string literal, a dot and a space, and then say the full name over here. So now we have the number 1, which is a real number, followed by a string, or two strings. Now, the technical term for this, the process that's happening, is called concatenation. And concatenation is the action of linking things together in a series. So in string concatenation, that's the operation of joining character strings end to end. Now, there are two functions called concat and concatenate in Excel. Concatenate used to be the function, and it was there until Excel 2013. However, in Excel 2016, the concat function replaced it. Now, concatenate is still available. Microsoft doesn't recommend that you use it because it's going to disappear at some point. So let me show you an example of how to use concat, and then I'll show you a better way to use concat. So here is one way. Let's take our existing string. So I'll just put it up here, D7 ampersand space ampersand E7 ampersand space ampersand F7. If we use the concat function, then instead of the ampersand, we would just have commas. So now we have got as many expressions as we want inside the closed bracket. So I've got 5 at the moment. And that does exactly the same job. Nothing different here. So it's whether you want to see the ampersand version or the concat version. And quite frankly, the ampersand version is the more usual way. So why am I telling you this? Well, let's look at the better way of using concat. And then I'll tell you why I don't. And there's a good reason for it. Let's say that these 5 people are my best salespeople. So these are ranked in order and these happen to be my best 5. And I want to say in B5, my best salespeople are, and then put Ken, Terry, Roberto, Rob, Gail, etc. So what I could do is have as a string literal, my best salespeople are, and then ampersand, B7, B8, B9, B10, B11. So there we have it, and maybe a full stop at the end. Well, it took a few ampersands to do that, and that's only if I'm trying to list my first 5 people. What if I was trying to list my top 50 or 100 people? That could take all day. However, what I can do instead of having all of this is have one concat function. And I would say concat, and then I would list a range. So instead of listing each cell individually, in other words, person 1, person 2, person 3, person 4, person 5, I would list a range. And that was the equivalent of saying person 1 to 5. And the way I can do that is to say what my first cell is, and then a colon, and say what my last cell is. So you can see I just dragged it out. And so this is my range, B7 to B11. And now let's close the brackets. So in this way, I'm able to do this and have my top 10 sellers, my top 15 sellers very quickly. But I know what you're going to say. There is no gap between the word Sanchez and Terry. It looks dreadful. Well, why don't we use this empty column C? Why don't we just put a space in this column? So I'm literally pressing a space. So it looks empty, but if you have a look at the len of it, it is now 1. It's got a space. So it's got a space, this has got a space, this has got a space, and I'll put comma and a space. And then a full stop at the end. So let's change this from being the range B7 to B11 to B7 to C11. So we're going B7 and C7 and B8 and C8. So again, I can do it with just the one formula, the one range. I don't have to specify each and every cell reference. I can just do it with a single range. So now let's press enter and see what we get. So we now have each salesperson separated by space. Suppose I want them separated by a comma. Well, I'll put comma space. So I'm hoping you're now seeing how easy concat can be when you have, instead of a single cell or references to multiple single cells, you have a range. So concat can be very useful then. So why don't I use it? Why do I say this isn't the way I would do it? Because I use TEXTJOIN for this. Now TEXTJOIN entered in Excel 2016. So if you've got Excel 2013 or earlier, or Excel for Mac 2011 or earlier, I'm afraid you won't have the TEXTJOIN. TEXTJOIN takes 2 additional arguments, so it's a bit more complicated. But notice what arguments they are. The first argument is the delimiter, in other words, what goes between each string. So I'm going to put in a comma and a space. That is going to go in between each string. And the second is, do I ignore empty cells or do I include empty cells? I'll show you that in just a moment. So if I say true for that and a comma, so the third argument and onwards, they are my text like I've got in concatenate. So now let's have a look. So without anything being in column C, we now have my best salespeople are Ken Sanchez, comma, Terry Duffy, comma, Roberto Tamburello, comma, etc. And then I'll put a full stop at the end, a dot. Very easy to use. It's getting more complicated, I'll give you that. But there are two additional arguments that go at the front. What goes between each version, each cell, and the second one is a true or false. And if I insert a new row 10, you'll see that nothing happens because it is ignoring an empty cell. It is not adding an extra comma like it would do if it was false, if I said don't ignore empty cells. But if it's true, that extra comma disappears. So this is when I use TEXTJOIN. So I've got a couple of questions for you, but before I do, I just want to say I hope you're enjoying this series of videos here on YouTube, and if you want to join me for a structured course, like for instance my Intermediate in Excel Advanced course, then please have a look at the description below or come to my website excelinoffice.com. And secondly, if you are enjoying these, please click the subscribe button and then the bell to be notified of any later videos. So my questions to you are, how would I change this if instead of having a comma between each of the names, I wanted the word and? And secondly, how could I use the substitute command to put an and before the last person if I was using the commas? If you don't want to tackle that, then here's a different question. What would happen if I reduced this range by 1? So instead of it going from B7 to B11, it went to B10. How could that aid me in getting the and at the end? So Rob Walters and Gail A. Erickson. Please put your answers in the comments to this YouTube video. I look forward to reading them and seeing how you compare with my answers. And I'll see you on the next video.